I'm going to tell you 3 stories that I swear are true. And by the time you finish listening, you might not want to go camping, ride a subway alone, or ever take a weird job again. Stay with me until the end. Because the last one still keeps me awake some nights. Here's the first one. This happened a long time ago. I was never the kind of person who enjoys sleeping outside. I'll just say it. I'm not built for camping. I hate the dirt. I hate the bugs. I hate how a sleeping bag feels comfortable for about 10 minutes and then turns into a bag of rocks by 3 in the morning. But even though I hate it, I've been camping more times than I can remember, and never once was it my idea. My dad is one of those guys who thinks happiness is found in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by trees and silence and the smell of smoke. Every single summer when I was a kid, he would drag me into the woods along with his friends who were exactly the same way. No phones, no screens, just nature. By the time I got to 10th grade, I was done pretending to enjoy it, so I finally convinced him to let me bring a friend. I thought if I had someone my age there, maybe it wouldn't feel like punishment. To my surprise, he said yes, without arguing. So I asked my friend Charles to come with us. Now, you might think bringing Charles would make things worse because back then he was a hardcore Boy Scout. He actually loved camping. But Charles was cool about it. He made fun of me for hating the outdoors, but he wasn't the type to say stuff like, "You're not a real man if you don't like sleeping on rocks." Plus, I figured if I had to suffer, at least I'd be suffering next to someone who could start a fire without burning down the forest. Charles was excited to come, partly because he loved camping, but also because back then he was looking for any excuse to get away from his parents. Unfortunately, things went wrong from the very beginning. One of my dad's friends messed up the campsite reservation. Instead of some remote, quiet spot deep in the woods, we ended up at this terrible, overdeveloped place. I'm talking indoor. Bathrooms, paved walking paths, even a playground for little kids. It wasn't camping, it was basically a backyard with a parking lot. My dad was furious. But we didn't even discover the worst part until a few hours later. Right next to our campsite was a small amusement park. I'm not joking. An actual amusement park with carnival games, a Ferris wheel, and a few roller coasters. It was completely surreal. Those 2 things were never supposed to exist next to each other. A quiet campground and a noisy amusement park. Everyone was angry. My dad and his friends kept complaining that this wasn't real camping. And Charles wouldn't shut up about it either. He kept saying, "This isn't real camping," over and over, like I needed to be reminded. Then he started making jokes about my family, implying that we didn't even know what real camping was. That got annoying fast. I told him to stop, and he did. But the whole situation just sucked. We had driven hours to get there. We couldn't just turn around and leave. So we made the best of it. The adults set up camp while sulking, and Charles stepped in like he was born for this. Within minutes, he had our tent up perfectly. Every knot tied right, the rainfly secure, the whole thing staked down like a picture from a manual. Even my dad, who never complimented anyone unless they were bleeding or unconscious, nodded in approval. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Charles and I shared a tent. Once everything was set up and dinner was over, we snuck away under the excuse of organizing our stuff. The truth was, Charles had brought a small metal pipe and some weed in an old Altoids tin. Nothing crazy, just enough to take the edge off. Back then, we were in that phase where we liked causing trouble and hanging out in places we didn't belong. I don't smoke anymore, and part of me still wonders if I only did it back then because I wanted to stand out and break the rules. Anyway, we went into the woods, smoked, and laughed to ourselves the whole time. We weren't worried about the smell because we planned to avoid the adults for the rest of the night. After that, we went back to the tent and just hung out for a few hours, talking about friends from school. Eventually, we both realized we had way too much energy to sleep. Charles had this mischievous grin on his face, and I knew he was thinking something stupid. He suggested we go explore the campsite. I wasn't interested until he said he meant explore the amusement park. That got my attention fast. He said it would probably be easy to climb to the top of one of the roller coasters. Back then, we loved climbing stuff. Buildings, water towers, you name it. The idea of climbing a roller coaster felt thrilling. So after we were sure everyone was asleep, we made our move. It was very late, well past midnight. We grabbed our flashlights and headed to the fence around the park. Climbing it wasn't hard. Charles gave me a boost and we were in. The park was dark, but we could see security guards patrolling. Every few minutes we'd hear the hum of a golf cart making rounds. It felt like being inside a stealth video game. We moved slowly, ducking behind buildings and keeping an eye on the patrols. At one point we had to sprint across an open road to avoid a guard. It was terrifying, but also exciting. A strange feeling. Everything seemed like a game, but we both knew we'd be in serious trouble if we got caught. We finally reached the base of the biggest roller coaster. From up close, it looked way larger than it had from the campsite. We spotted maintenance stairs running up alongside the track and didn't hesitate. The metal rungs made soft clanging sounds as we climbed, trying not to make too much noise. Some parts didn't have railings, which was honestly terrifying, but we kept going. When we reached the top, the view was unbelievable. We could see the entire park below us. We took one single photo up there. I wish we had taken more, but we were being extremely careful not to draw attention. If someone spotted us from below, we wouldn't have been able to get away in time. Eventually, we figured we had pushed our luck long enough and decided to head back down. After reaching the bottom, we started creeping back through the park the same way we came. For some reason, the return trip felt much faster. Maybe the patrols weren't as frequent at that hour. I don't know. We were about 5 minutes from the spot where we had climbed the fence when we had to stop. One of the guards was making a round in a golf cart, so we quickly ducked behind a small snack shack and waited for him to pass. That's when I noticed something move in the dark. At first, I thought I imagined it. Or maybe it was just a shadow from the golf cart's headlights. But then Charles tapped my arm and pointed in the same direction. I focused my eyes and saw it clearly. About 30 feet away, barely visible in the darkness between two buildings, was another person. They were crouching down just like us, like they were also sneaking around and trying to avoid the guards. It didn't look like a kid, though. The worst part was that I was almost certain they were staring directly at us. Now we were actually scared. Between the patrolling guards and this stranger, the situation was becoming too much. But we still couldn't move. The guards hadn't passed yet. I kept my eyes locked on the figure, and then it started moving. It darted across an open patch of ground and passed right through the small spill of light from a nearby street lamp. For a split second, I saw him clearly. It was a man. He was wearing torn, dirty clothes, and he moved with an awkward limp, like he was injured or disfigured. But none of that was as disturbing as the dark liquid smeared across his face. It looked like blood. Charles saw it too. We exchanged a terrified look. Then the man ducked out of sight. The guard finally passed us and we kept moving. We didn't say a word as we made our way back to the fence. I kept looking over my shoulder every few seconds, convinced we were being followed. But no one was there. We climbed back over the fence the same way we came in and dropped down on the other side. But this time, we didn't laugh about anything. All I wanted was to be back inside the safety of our tent. I could tell Charles felt the same way. By the time we got back, neither of us mentioned sleeping. We just lay there in our sleeping bags, trying to make sense of what we had seen. The only explanation we could come up with was that it was some homeless guy doing God knows what. A stupid explanation, I know, but we couldn't think of anything else. The next morning started out normal. We got up, ate breakfast, and started packing our gear to go fishing. But around 10 in the morning, one of the camp staff members came to our site and made an announcement for everyone to hear. Apparently, a man had been stabbed and killed the night before at a lake about 4 miles from the campground. They weren't giving many details, but the person who did it was still on the run. The local sheriff's office had asked all park rangers and campsite staff within a certain radius to be on high alert. They described the suspect as a disheveled white male in his late 30s, shirtless, possibly bleeding or with blood on his clothes. Then they told us to pack up and leave for our own safety. Charles and I connected the dots instantly. It had to be the man we saw. We kept our mouths shut. We didn't tell my dad. We didn't tell the Rangers. And I still don't fully understand why. I know I'll get hate for admitting that. And I get it. But at that age, I was more focused on staying out of trouble than anything else. I still kick myself for not speaking up. My statement could have helped catch a dangerous person who might have gone on to commit more crimes. I'm still close with Charles. We went to the same college, graduated together, and work in similar fields. But we don't talk about that. Not very often. If I'm being honest, I think Charles feels more guilty about it than I do. Mistakes and regret aside, it still blows my mind that my friend and I were only feet away from a murderer on the run. I don't like thinking about what could have happened if we had crossed paths with him directly. That's the first story. Here's the second. This happened back in October of 2016, right when that weird clown panic was all over the news. People were posting creepy clown sightings all across the country. Most of them were fake, obviously. Just people looking for attention. But as you probably remember, there were a few real cases that were genuinely terrifying. What happened to me was one of them. I was 16 years old, a junior in high school. I had just finished 7th period, and after saying goodbye to my friends, I got on the number 6 train heading uptown. The train was mostly empty, which was a little unusual but not completely rare. I wasn't paying much attention to my surroundings. I had my headphones in and was blasting music. Drake, probably. To make things worse, I was reviewing chemistry flashcards on my phone. So I was about as unaware as a person could possibly be. Never a good idea when you're traveling alone. But I knew the area well enough to think I'd probably be fine. I planned to get off at 96th Street and walk home from there. Nothing unusual, just a regular Wednesday. But things went downhill very fast. We arrived at 96th Street, and I jumped out of my seat without really looking up. That train ride was something. I had done so many times that the routine had become automatic. Getting on and off was like a reflex. With my head still buried in my phone and my music still blasting in my ears, I walked toward the doors. But as soon as they slid open, I noticed from the corner of my eye that something was blocking my way. I looked up and saw that a man had stepped directly into the doorway. Only it wasn't a normal person. It was a clown. He was wearing the full outfit. Oversized rainbow pants, a baggy yellow shirt with red suspenders, giant red shoes, and thick white makeup smeared across his face. Red nose, blue eyebrows, the whole cartoon nightmare. The only thing missing was the wig. I froze. I couldn't move. Not only was I completely caught off guard, but I had never been that close to something so bizarre in my entire life. He didn't say anything. He just stood there. Not trying to get on the train, but clearly blocking me from getting off. I snapped out of it and realized I had maybe 5 seconds before the doors closed. I tried to push past him. But the moment I made contact with him, he leaned down in one smooth motion, like he was trying to put his face right in front of mine. Before he could grab me, I sprinted past him, and that's when he lunged forward, trying to tackle me. I dodged him and kept running, and he started chasing me. It was absolutely terrifying. There was no one else around. I was being chased by a killer clown. The 96th Street station is usually quiet in the early afternoon, so I was completely on my own. I glanced behind me and saw him running after me. But his stride wasn't normal. He moved with this jerky motion, like his arms and legs were the wrong size. But I was much more focused on what was now in his hand. It looked like a kitchen knife. I don't know where he had been hiding it. I didn't care what his intentions were. I just ran. I went up the stairs and out of the station and immediately called the police. He didn't follow me onto the street, but I was still shaking. The police sent someone down to the station, but by then he was gone. Even after talking to the officers and being told I was safe, I couldn't get this irrational thought out of my head that he somehow knew where I lived and would track me down later. That didn't happen, obviously. Nothing else ever came of it. I wouldn't be surprised if my story ended up on the news as one of the many strange clown encounters from 2016. It took me a few weeks to fully get over that experience. But to this day, I still hate empty subway platforms. That's the second story. The third one is different. It's not your typical scary story, but I promise it's worth listening to all the way through. I was 2 years out of college when this started. I was technically working on an online graduate certificate at the same school where I got my bachelor's degree, but I still had a ton of free time. During that period of my life, I was jumping from odd job to odd job, looking for anything that would fill the hours and help me save some money. Let's just say I spent a lot of time on job websites. I honestly found 90% of my leads from one site alone. I was getting tired of delivering food around the same 6 neighborhoods for minimum wage, so I decided I needed a change. Later that night, while I was browsing job listings, I found something that caught my attention. It was a private lifeguard position at a hotel a few towns over. That doesn't sound strange by itself, but there were a couple of weird details in the listing that made me pause. First, the hours were backwards. A normal hotel pool opens in the morning and closes in the evening, maybe with a break in the middle of the day. But this was the opposite. They wanted someone to run and supervise a swimming pool from 5 in the evening until 1 in the morning. Basically, a night shift for a pool. But that wasn't the strangest part. The requirement specifically asked for someone who did not speak Spanish. Let me say that again. They wanted someone who did not speak Spanish. Here was the problem. I had been speaking Spanish since I was a little kid. I'm half Mexican, and the town where the hotel was located was mostly made up of Spanish-speaking Americans, so that requirement made no sense to me. In fact, nothing about the listing made sense. I remember being completely confused while reading through it, but there was one thing I felt good about: $30 an hour. Back then, that was like finding a gold bar on the sidewalk, so I ignored all the other weirdness and focused on the money. I decided I would just pretend not to know Spanish. What were they going to do? The job must have been either brand new or in very low demand, because I heard back within a few hours and was invited to interview. Fast forward to my first day. I pulled up to the hotel and everything looked normal. A stocky guy who looked like he might be Mexican came out to greet me. We exchanged names and had a laugh. He was actually very friendly and pretty funny. His easygoing attitude put me at ease a little. But as we walked into the hotel complex, another man, taller than the first, turned a corner and started staring at me. I could tell immediately that I was being sized up. I started wondering if the friendly guy was just there to lower my guard. The second man walked right up to me and started speaking to me in Spanish. He didn't smile, didn't say hello, didn't shake my hand, nothing. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was testing whether I actually understood Spanish. So, the job listing hadn't been a joke. I gave him a blank stare, even though I understood every word. He wasn't saying anything crazy, just rambling about the weather or something. Nothing important enough to remember. After a few seconds, I looked at the first guy. He looked at the taller guy. And then both of them burst out laughing like they had been playing a prank on me. The taller guy smiled, reached out his hand, and said he was just messing with me. I played along, but I was already feeling uneasy. He introduced himself as Jefe. The bigger guy was Esteban. The three of us walked through the hotel to get to the pool. Jefe, who I assumed was in charge, started explaining the job. He said they needed someone to work late hours because they wanted to increase revenue. They were going to start charging people who weren't hotel guests just to use the pool. I didn't even know if that was legal, but I wasn't about to complain. He told me they wanted someone who didn't speak Spanish because it would prevent rowdy outsiders from trying to harass me. I didn't fully understand that, but I went along with it. My responsibilities were simple. Lifeguard, obviously. Collect money from non-guests who wanted to use the pool. Call Jefe if there was any problem. And there was one more thing. Jefe told me that if anyone showed me a blue wristband, I was to let them into what he called the pool house. That was a large building behind the lifeguard stand. I didn't ask questions. The first week was very relaxed. Actually, the first few weeks were relaxed. More people used the pool than I expected, so I stayed busy. I collected money from outsiders and kept an eye on the water. No one showed me a blue wristband. That changed, about a month in. On some random day, a muscular Hispanic guy in sunglasses and a white button-down shirt walked up to me. He clearly didn't speak English. He showed me his wristband, and I unlocked the pool house door. About an hour later, he came out and started walking toward the exit. The door locked automatically, so I didn't have to get down or interact with him again. But I watched him leave. His backpack looked significantly fuller than it had been when he arrived. Other than that, everything seemed normal. Over the next few weeks, more and more people started showing me wristbands. Many of them arrived together. More non-guests started using the pool too, because I began collecting a lot more money than before. At one point, I realized I was collecting too much money. People would overpay me by a crazy amount, consistently. I called Jefe about it, and he told me not to worry. He said people make mistakes all the time, but I could tell he didn't want to talk about it. He hung up while I was still in the middle of a sentence. That short, otherwise harmless phone call confirmed something for me. I was involved in something, more than just lifeguarding a pool. After I hung up, the true weight of the situation hit me. My mind started pushing out all the noise until there was only one thought I couldn't get rid of. Money laundering. I didn't know what to do. On one hand, my gut was telling me I was involved in something illegal and I should leave immediately. On the other hand, I had no safe way to confirm that suspicion, and I didn't want to give up $30 an hour over nothing, so I kept my mouth shut and kept working. After that moment, I started piecing everything together. The pool house, the building I had been told was just a pool house, was clearly where the shady activity took place. Illegal gambling, drug trafficking, something worse. Whatever it was happening right behind me every single day, hidden by only one locked door. The people using the pool started getting more friendly with me, especially the ones wearing wristbands. Strangers learned my name. I went from just collecting money to receiving tips, high fives, and greetings. As people got more comfortable with me, they started talking in front of me. I would catch pieces of their conversations in Spanish. And let's just say all my suspicions were confirmed. The extra benefits made it easier to overlook everything else. Plus, my hands were clean. I was just doing a job. Speaking of the job, a few days later I had to rescue a drowning child. It wasn't anything heroic, just a kid who wandered into the deep end and clearly couldn't swim. But when I came back up to the surface, everyone gave me a standing ovation. It was a very strange feeling. After that, Jefe himself came down from wherever he had been in the hotel and thanked me personally. He said he owed me his life. I didn't understand what he meant until I realized the child I saved was actually his son. The next day, Jefe, Esteban, and a bunch of other men, some of whom I recognized as wristband wearers, were all waiting at the gate to greet me with a glass of wine. That felt great at first, but the good feeling didn't last. After everyone toasted me, one of the men made a toast in Spanish. I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was not a pleasant speech. He basically toasted all the money they were making and all the lives they were destroying. Whatever that meant. Everyone laughed and drank. But that was the moment I realized I had become addicted to something seriously dangerous. No amount of money or tips should have kept me at that hotel as long as I stayed. And yet, regrettably, I had stayed. The next day, my mother called me while I was at work. I won't go into details, but my mom, rest her soul, never called unless it was very important. So I had to answer. I got down from my lifeguard stand and walked to what I thought was a private little alcove so I could have some privacy. My mom only ever spoke Spanish, so naturally I had to speak Spanish with her. I don't remember what she called about. What I do remember is that after I hung up and turned around to go back to the pool, Esteban was standing right in my path, staring at me. He did not look like the same friendly guy I had met on my first day. After a long, awkward pause, he asked me how long I had known Spanish. I played dumb. I said I was just practicing with a friend and wanted to learn, but I knew he saw right through me. He just kept staring like he was thinking about something. My heart started racing. I felt like he was deciding whether or not to hurt me. Eventually, he just said, "Okay." Then he turned around and walked away. I immediately went back to my post. I thought about leaving, but I couldn't make myself get out of the chair. I was afraid they might see that as a sign of guilt. I might have been failing a test. They probably knew where I lived. All of those thoughts raced through my mind as I sat there frozen, praying nothing would happen. A few minutes before my shift ended, Esteban came back. He told me to arrive an hour early the next day because he would have a new opportunity to offer me. Then he tipped me a couple $100 and walked back into the hotel. When I left that day, I never went back. No way. That situation had no good ending. I don't think I was ever followed home. But for months afterward, I was a paranoid wreck. Every van or suspicious car on my street freaked me out. There were nights when I just stayed awake for hours, thinking about what could have happened. Even after all these years, there are things I still don't understand. They were obviously moving drugs. I get that. But why they needed me at all is something I never figured out. My best guess is that they just needed someone on the payroll. Who could act like a clueless employee if the police ever showed up? Who knows? I still believe I was very close to losing my life that day. As unlikely as that may sound to anyone hearing this, I'm telling you the truth. The way Esteban glared at me, there was only one thing on his mind. And I'm just glad I walked away when I did. Thanks for listening to the end. If you want more stories like these, let me know in the comments. And whatever you do tonight, pay attention to your surroundings. You never know who's watching.